Welcome to my video cast, Foresight with Evelyn Morales. Today, I have with me a very accomplished guest and friend, Dr. Scott Parazynski. Scott is a highly decorated physician, retired astronaut, and an entrepreneur. He graduated from Stanford University and medical school and trained for a career in emergency medicine. In 1992, he was selected to join NASA Astronaut Corps and eventually flew 5 incredible space shuttle missions and conducted 7 spacewalks. In 2007, Scott led the spacewalking team of the STS-120, during which he performed 4 very challenging and unique spacewalks. I have to mention, I was honored to be part of the team supporting his spacewalk, training them using virtual reality technology. Scott is also a diver, a pilot, and an accomplished mountaineer. In 2009, he became the first astronaut to stand on top of the world, literally, on the summit of Mount Everest. He's a founder and CEO of Fluidity Technologies, which is a company focused on the development of input devices, utilizing a learning machine to pilot through physical and virtual environments. Scott, welcome, and thank you for accepting my invitation to talk today about what it takes to become an entrepreneur.
Great to be with you, Evelyn, and I love your background. You can see behind me the flight deck of Endeavor. I wish I was talking to you from space, or we were talking to one another up in space, but our connection is through the virtual reality lab where you, as you described, help prepare me and my crew for some very difficult things up in space. Really cool high-tech things that you developed, and it's certainly been a great asset to the building of the International Space Station. It's a great accomplishment of yours. It's fun to talk to you about my entrepreneurial journey, which has been very non-linear, as I'm sure we'll get into.
Definitely. And well, talking about this, as after such a highly successful careers as a physician, as an astronaut, what motivated you to become an entrepreneur?
Poor judgment, I guess. People. I do a lot of keynote speaking in a non-pandemic world. When we're actually able to gather together, congregate. I give lots of talks, and invariably I talk about my experiences as an astronaut and as a climber. And people always ask me, "What's the toughest thing you've ever done?" That crazy solar array repair that you did, or summiting Mount Everest. And I tell them, neither. The toughest thing I've ever done is start a tech company, because it's so multifaceted. There's so many different things that have to go right in order to succeed, and the odds are stacked against you from day one. And I'm a very creative person. I'm an inventor, so I have many patents and big ideas, and I've gotten some of them to market through tenacity. But this is the first kind of from the ground up kind of company that I've started. My company, Fluidity Technologies, and so I thought very naively way back when that the hardest part of growing a highly successful company is having a brilliant world-changing kind of idea. That's the easy part. That's it's all uphill from there. It's the fundraising, it's the manufacturing, it's the marketing, it's the HR. It's building a team around what you're doing. So it's a very daunting but exciting journey. And so all told, I'm excited I've done it, but it's very tiring.
No, I can see. And you mentioned something important, which is the creativity. Mm-hmm. Because I think to start a business, and this is for the audience, you have to have that trait of creating new products, services. So you definitely think it's important. is a big part of starting a business, right?
Absolutely. However, I would say that not everyone possesses that style of creativity to have to build a new product or service. But what you do need is a team, and so it takes creatives, it takes leadership, of course, it takes business acumen and finance. And then there are legal elements to it, marketing. So it takes a variety of skills and a variety of personality types as well. And so what I've really valued as I've grown my team is expanding the diversity of our team. I like people who think differently than me. I don't want people to tell me everything that comes out of my mouth is spot on. I want them to challenge me, and they do. And it's been very, very helpful as we've grown.
And that was one of the questions about what type of people do you, come together to work? Who do you bring to your team that is an asset? So you just
Yeah.
mentioned people from different type of areas that can contribute.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my interesting jobs in the past, after I left NASA, actually, I worked at the Houston Methodist Hospital Research Institute here in Houston. And it's an amazing medical research facility. Brilliant minds, great physicians, nurses, and scientists. And I was the chief technology officer there. And one of the things that I did is I would have these kind of brown bag lunches or town hall kinds of gatherings. And I would not only reach out to the senior surgeons and physicians in the hospital, but I wanted the brand new nurses right out of school and the respiratory therapists and even the janitors. Everyone who touched patient care saw things slightly differently, and we would have these sessions. What's going well? Where are the choke points in patient care? What's causing you undue stress? Where are we losing money? Where do people experience the greatest amount of pain in the work that you do? And what I found is that sometimes it was the most junior person, the person that you wouldn't expect would have the aha moment, who would come up with this significant unmet need that could be a real source of innovation. And so that's really sat with me. And so I really seek out people that think differently than me, come from different places, look differently. When you can kind of get different mindsets around a problem, you can invariably come up with really outstanding solutions.
So, well, I mean, definitely starting a business is probably one of the most challenging things, like you said,
No.
and we're thankful for LLCs and those type of, a business that allow us to try and, and not be liable, and avoid some of those problems. So, because many people should endeavor to try their ideas, if they wish so, but obviously most of them do not succeed to what they. So you do need to be prepared, having the components that you mentioned, the people around that can help on that to that. So having really a unique product is not all, right? Just
It's it's not. It's important. You do have to have something that people desire, that they're willing to give up their hard-earned dollars for. But you need service. You need the ability to grow your company, to continue to be able to support innovation. It's there's so many different things that go into producing a product and continuing to grow your company. But one of the things I would also point out is what was probably the most important attribute is resilience. It's not if you're going to fail, you will fail along that pathway. The company doesn't have to fail. You just have to solve the problem or problems and keep moving. You have to be ready, willing, and able to make small micro pivots along the way to get to where you want to go with your company and with your team.
Correct. And now are all innovations, since you mentioned about innovating, and through the process of creating a company and a product like that, I mean, you do have to apply some of that. Are all innovations justified that?
Huh. Yeah.
Because I see, yeah, and I know some are
Yeah.
obviously for the enhancement of civilization.
Mhm.
I can mention some out of the top of my head, like SpaceX, landing boosters back on Earth, you know.
Yeah, amazing
So,
things
so
happen.
that's something that we needed in order to lower the cost, right,
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
traveling towards the future. So, are they all justified on your view?
No, no, they're not. And so, you know, I guess just talking more broadly about innovation, as an inventor, I, I would typify the best types of inventors are people that are not just noticing problems, not just whiners, but motivated whiners, people that identify problems and then cogitate upon them and come up with solutions to fix them. And what I've found is that there's almost no problem that could not be solved by some combination of technologies. If you're astute enough to figure out, hey, this is a problem worthy of being fixed, people would value this. But unfortunately, sometimes uh, the medicine is worse than the disease. Sometimes it's just a step too far. Either it's too costly, it's too inconvenient, it creates other problems. So not every innovation is going to make it, and so it's kind of discouraging actually. You think you've identified this fantastic technology. You want to bring it to market, but then you find in your research that either someone's already tried that and failed, or that it creates other problems, or um, you run into some other obstacles. So you really have to be very careful. You're vetting, is there a pathway between your brilliant idea on a paper napkin and on a store shelf or on Amazon, or wherever it's going to go.
Well, and so that's when management skills and business, understanding about business comes into play, because that's when you put it on practice. Is the product needed? Is this the
Mhm.
right market? Time. It could be just time. Uh,
Timing is everything. Yeah. Mhm.
so I guess that obviously that has been important for you, and you mentioned about the different type of people that you have to collaborate with. Uh, so how do you now, you talk about resiliency, and this is something very important actually that sustain me through the career, redeveloping VR,
Mhm.
and that technology to apply for all these missions throughout time. So how do you, resiliency very important. I mean, tell me some cases in which you have to apply that within your business. Uh,
Yeah. So, well, yeah, I guess probably one of the most significant lessons I've learned in my life was as a Boy Scout. It actually taught me resiliency. The highest rank in the American Boy Scouts it's called the Eagle Scout rank, and it's a very limited number of scouts actually make it to that rank, because it takes a lot of merit badges, a lot of ranks, a lot of service projects, and it can be very discouraging. And what I set out to do, I really wanted to achieve the Eagle Scout rank. So I broke it down into manageable piece parts. It was one merit badge at a time, one rank at a time. And ultimately, I achieved smaller successes along the pathway to where I wanted to be. And that's kind of how I've approached my entire career, becoming an astronaut and a physician, to climbing Mount Everest. It's also a very daunting physical challenge, and you have to break it down into a day at a time, a rope length at a time, sometimes even a footstep at a time on summit morning to actually make it up to the top. So if you can kind of visualize where you want to be with your company,
mhm.
you have to then uh, define achievable milestones along that pathway. We're gonna get our minimum viable product out by September. We're gonna do beta testing. We're gonna tweak it, and we're gonna begin the tooling, and we're gonna have our first products in the hands of thought leaders. I mean, there's this whole litany of things you got to do before you actually have your first product release. But you know, have these goals out there, and be steadfast in working towards them.
Right. And yeah, you said something important that, I mean, I don't think if you break down, right, the problem ahead,
Mm-hmm.
and you break it in pieces and kind of accommodate it to obtain a solution for each of those, at the end, then you'll get the big solution for the big, your challenge. In this case, getting the product out and
Right.
being successful with it. So that's very important, and that's, yes, that, like you say, that's where you build resiliency. Constantly doing that. Obviously, the early you learn that as a young person, I think the most important, the most meaningful will be later on when you apply it to these endeavors in businesses or jobs that you have. So now, how difficult, because I think this is probably, like you say, the most difficult, how difficult was to have your first customer when your first sale?
Yeah. So it
Or,
was.
well, have you have, glad.
Yeah, no, we set out with my current company, Fluidity Technologies, to do a crowdfunding campaign through Kickstarter, and we did that not to make a lot of money. We did sell quite a bit of product, and we had a very successful campaign. But the goal was to, validate the market, get early feedback on our product and our branding, and we got a lot of that. Customers today are very vocal in what they like, but also what they don't like, and they're not shy about telling you. So those are great lessons, and so it was a long time coming getting to our Kickstarter campaign to fulfill product. Everything takes twice as long and costs twice as much, and I've seen that in a couple of companies, and of course we know that from our NASA days, right?
Yes.
We take you set off to do something really audacious in space, and it's going to take a while, and it's going to be a whole lot more complex than anyone ever envisioned.
Right. Well, and talking about the customers, for me, the customers were you. They asked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So every time you came back from a space, we will sit you down and say, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what should we enhance, improve, etc. And then
Us,
through
us,
that
us, us whiny astronauts, right?
no, never, never. It was sold to enhance the technology, but enhance more than anything the activity, so that it was more realistic. We get into a positive training, which requires that level of what is it? That level of adjustments to make it better.
Adaptability. Yeah. You made such great incremental improvements along the way based on the feedback that you got. It was wonderful.
And it was in all levels.
Mm-hmm.
See, I couldn't tell you that it was just on the hardware side. It was on the software side. It was, integration of new pieces or parts, or that could enhance then one of the, areas. So, I mean, it was pretty comprehensive, but it was a constant coming back to the customers, which were you. And thankfully, we had that through all the time building the space station. I mean, as you can imagine, we couldn't continue to pioneer a technology like that without the customers' feedback. Mm-hmm. But having the first customers, when an astronaut came and say, yes, we're going to do this and use VR for the Hubble Space Telescope training, which was the first one we did, that was a big thing. So
right.
So tell me now more about your the product, your company, and
So Fluidity Technologies is actually based on my experiences in space, in the VR lab, in surgical robotics, flying the space shuttle robotic arm, flying aircraft, really understanding, especially up in space, when you can reorient yourself, pitch, yaw, roll, the attitude of yourself, as well as the location, X, Y, Z. We call that, as you know, 6 degrees of freedom of motion, the position and attitude of an object or a point of reference, like the end of a robotic arm or the nose of a drone. And so I got to thinking about the complexity of surgical robotics when I got back from my missions and I had retired. I was actually at this research institute that I had mentioned earlier in our conversation, looking at the Da Vinci surgical robots that are still the gold standard for doing the very delicate procedures inside the human body at a workstation a few feet away from the patient. And it's a very difficult skill to learn. Your hands are kind of enveloped in these little finger loops, and you take off your shoes, and your toes are on different key pegs, and you're doing all this stuff. It's like, you know, chewing bubble gum, rubbing your belly, and you're tapping your head at the same time. It's a lot of stuff going on, and if you do it all the time, you can develop a skill and a proficiency level that will allow you to get really good outcomes and shorten the time in the operating room, which is money. But if you aren't doing them all the time, the results aren't nearly as good. And so I started to think about, well, you know, I've flown all these different things. Could I make a better way to move a point of reference with great precision and accuracy, and giving tactile feedback to the operator, making it such that they can really focus on what they're doing as opposed to the mechanics of how they're getting there. And that's what we created. I invented a technology initially for surgical robots, but since the barriers to entry for anything involving the human body and health are very, very high through the FDA, decided to go to another very rapidly growing market, which is drone flight.
Yes.
And I've loved drones from the very early days, and so we've applied our technology to flying drones with great precision and intuitive ease. But ultimately, we'll be able to fly, you know, ROVs under the ocean, helicopters, aircraft, industrial cranes, computer games, AR, VR, even surgical robotics.
Right.
So that's the broad scope of my company. We're currently selling, you know, into the drone marketplace, but we have a lot of interest in other markets as well. These other verticals that I talked about, where they can use advanced human-machine interfaces.
And you know what I see, definitely this is a growing area for educational purposes in terms of preparing the young people into piloting techniques and drone, because I think this is definitely going to be a huge growing area.
Absolutely.
Need to be, you know, it's a methodology, and it takes some learning. So I think some of these programs will definitely grow towards the future, you know, using these actually devices that you're designing. So I see a lot of that happening. How is the FAA with regulation in terms of flying drones and things like that? What have you encountered? And actually, I know you integrate also, is it some VR also into that? Yes.
Yes, we do. Yes. Yeah. The first part of your question about, you asked about regulation, and yes, the FAA has been relatively permissive. You know, I would say, you know, for at least recreational flight. I think, you know, as certain bad outcomes happen, like you know, people flying onto, you know, Gatwick Airport and interrupting air traffic control and the flow of aircraft there, and maybe, you know, doing something even much worse. You know, regulations have to build up around that, and so it's still a very early, nascent field. But I think drones are getting smarter. For one, you know, collision avoidance sensors and capabilities are getting better. You know, there are also situational awareness tools that will soon allow all pilots, whether they're drone pilots or helicopter or fixed wing pilots, to know what is in the airspace around them at all times. And so these greater situational awareness tools will help. And then I think the regulatory framework to do commercial work is getting better. So ultimately, pilots will be able to fly beyond visual line of sight. Currently, you know, as a drone pilot, you have to have your eyes on your drone as you're doing your flight. So you can't get, you know, more than a, you know,
Right.
depends how good your eyesight is. But
It's not like I can be flying from my room, right? And the drone is
well,
outside.
exactly. Yeah, I know. So ultimately, we should be able to, you know, fly from a mission control and have great tools around us, and to be able to do inspections of power lines and oil and gas lines that extend for hundreds of miles, and it should be just fine. But we're not quite there yet.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, not for commercial. That's good.
right.
And also, I asked you about the VR
Yeah.
portion of it.
Yeah. So our technology is very, very powerful for moving in a virtual environment as well. So anything that's in a um, that is involves motion through a three-dimensional space, whether it's behind a screen, a 2D screen, or if it's a 3D rendering in a VR AR environment, we can actually fly through that with seamless ease, as opposed to in many types of VR simulations. You sort of jump from one volume to the next with HTC Vive or other types of controllers. I think it's going to be much more natural and probably less provocative to the wearer of these devices to be able to move more naturally.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, these are great. I mean, this is a great conversation. Thank you so much for, sharing with my audience about, what you're doing and about the difficulties of the business.
You're very welcome. No, it's been fun catching up with you, Evelyn. Thanks for inviting me on your show.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Scott. And I was glad to see you. Happy to see you. And I hope you continue to do well. We'll keep in touch.
Great.
Okay. Thank you.